Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and I've been saying that for a year exactly to the day. Spinster's Library has just turned 1. In this 1 year of running a Booktube channel, I have learned a lot. I've learned the very basics of filming and editing, of scripting a video. I've learned how to use social media, really. I've learned a lot about books from watching other Booktube channels, and I've learned how to talk about books. But one of the most valuable things I have learned is which books I actually like and which books I don't like, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. On the 20th of October 2017, the first video on this channel came out titled Favourite Books and Genres. In that video I struggled a lot with defining what I like. I listed Harry Potter and I listed Pride and Prejudice and The Picture of Dorian Gray, but even the very question of what my favourite books and genres are made me quite uncomfortable, because I didn't really have a good answer to that. In order to understand that, let's go back a few years to 2014-2015. I wasn't really reading a lot then, and I was in that years-long low-key reading slump that I believe a lot of people get in their early 20s when they have just been fully immersed into what we like to call adult life. I had just moved to the UK, I was planning a wedding, I was trying to work on my music degree, and reading just kind of fell by the wayside. And that's the time when I discovered Booktube, and that made me want to read again. As a child and a teenager, I was always reading. I finished one book and picked up the next one right away. I was constantly reading, and I was constantly talking about books with my brother, who was also a reader. But by the time I was in my early 20s, I'd kind of lost that mojo. So I found Booktube. I found it through a collaboration of Jean from Jean Bookish Thoughts and Jen Campbell. I don't know on which of their channels it was. Both of them are linked down below, by the way, because if you're not subscribed to them, then what are you doing? Anyway, I discovered Booktube and that made me interested in reading again. I also then, through Booktube, found Goodreads and I made an account on that. In 2016, I set myself the humble goal of reading 12 books, and I surpassed that. I read 18. Go me. But out of those 18 books, 10 were rereads, because I just didn't know how to choose new books, how to pick up a book that I didn't already know and read that for the first time. So I'd met Charlie in my first year at university, and we started talking about books a lot because she loves books, and we kind of bonded over that. The books she read were very different from the books that I read. She read a lot of really exciting new releases, science fiction, fantasy series, a lot of books aimed at young adult readers as well. And those were exactly the sort of books that I saw talked about on Booktube a lot. That was before I discovered that there were plenty of really small channels who talked about all sorts of genres. So at that time, I was, apart from Jean and Jen, I was subscribed to a lot of the really big booktubers that you just kind of naturally find by searching for book reviews online. But their books were not the books that I was reading. But for lack of other options, I gave these a go. So in 2017, I read a lot of books that I borrowed from friends on their recommendations, and then I just wasn't into them. In 2017, I read 50 books, which is a huge amount more than I read the year before. But among those 50 books, there was only one that I gave a 5-star rating to. That one book, by the way, is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. But I didn't think it was particularly weird. Honestly, I thought that I was just very, very picky, and that most books just didn't impress me all that much. In the summer of that year, Charlie and I decided to start a book podcast, and that then quickly turned into a YouTube channel when I introduced her to the concept of Booktube. So starting from October 2017, for 2 or 3 months, we would meet once or twice a week, record a couple of videos, then I would edit them and upload them to Spinster's Library. And that's how it came that in October of 2017, a very confused me tried to explain which books I liked and didn't like, and failed at that miserably. By the way, that video, if you want to see it, is going to be linked in the description box. If you really, really want to watch through the and very humble and slightly embarrassing beginnings of this channel. And then something happened quite naturally. If you force yourself to talk about books in a somewhat analytical way, as I try to do on this channel, you end up reading differently. So in the months since I started this channel, almost as a side effect, I figured out which books I like, because if I didn't like a book, I then had to explain why I didn't like it. I knew that I was drawn to 19th and early 20th century classics, but I never knew why. Actually, I was slightly embarrassed for that preference because people around me, both on Booktube and in real life, were not reading these books. They were reading shiny new releases. Again, as before, I found plenty of wonderful Booktube channels that do talk about classics as much as I do. So I figured out why I love classics. They are usually quite slow-paced, and they are set in a world that is not like our modern-day world, but close enough for me to be able to picture it. I realized that the pace of a book is one of the most important factors in whether I like a book or not. If something is described as a page-turner on the blurb, then it's probably not for me. I need slowly building plots, and I don't like books that have a lot of action in them. I also realized that I love good character building in books. If a character is to my liking, I will gladly read about their workday and their shopping habits and their morning routines, and I don't actually need a plot to keep me going through the book. I also found out that I like a very specific writing style. It has to flow really well, the prose has to be beautifully written, but just be descriptive enough, but not too much, and just artsy enough. And basically, I discovered that I'm a massive style snob. I've also found out that I do enjoy literature aimed at children and young adults in small doses. Books aimed at adults are definitely my comfort zone reads, and I do like to branch out of them, but forcing myself to exclusively read something specific just because it's popular with other people is not going to work for me, and it's not going to keep me reading. Now I know all of these things, I'm finding it much easier to choose books based on other people's recommendations. 2018 has been the best reading year yet, and so far I've discovered 5 new books that I've given a 5-star rating to. That's 5 times as much as last year. I am loving what I'm reading again, and I have Booktube to thank for that entirely. So thank you who have stuck with Spinster's library since the awkward webcam beginnings. Thank you to Charlie for starting all of this with me. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed recently. Thank you to everyone who has left a comment recommending a book that I ended up loving. And just thank you to all of you who are part of this community. It is a wonderful, wonderful community, and I'm so happy to be part of it. Thank you for watching. Bye.